If you've ever worried whether the product you sold will still make sense years from now, this episode delivers on that promise. Because Penn Mutual products weren't built by accident. They were shaped by a clear philosophy and driven forward by our Chief Product Officer, who's retiring this May. Most financial professionals see product. They don't see the years of discipline, restraint, and tough decisions behind them. That's why chasing the shiny new thing feels tempting, but often backfires. Today, you'll hear how real products are built, why Penn Mutual refuses gimmicks, and how a philosophy, not hype, shaped the broadest portfolio in the industry. Stay with us. You'll hear the thinking behind it all.
Life Matters, a Penn Mutual podcast for financial professionals.
Welcome to another episode of Life Matters, a Penn Mutual podcast. I'm your host, Bill Bell, Vice President of Advanced Sales with Penn Mutual, and I am so pleased that you chose to join us here today. Now, I teased it up front, but this is an episode all about product, specifically life insurance products. And who better to have on to talk about life insurance products than Penn Mutual's Chief Product Officer, Ray Caucci. Ray and I talk about the Penn Mutual product portfolio, some of the philosophy behind our product choices, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So without further ado, let's just get to that conversation that Ray and I had, and I'll be back on to wrap up the show afterwards. Ray, thanks for joining us on this episode.
Well, Bill, thanks for inviting me for a second time. I appreciate it.
So let's start off at the beginning. I want to get a little context in regards to your career here at Penn Mutual, because most of the people that are going to be listening to this are familiar with you, but many of them are not. So let's go back to the very beginning. How did you find yourself at Penn Mutual, and why did you stay for almost 40 years?
So I applied for a summer internship in 1986. I was going to the University of Pennsylvania at the time, and at the time, Penn Mutual's offices were at Fifth and Walnut in Philadelphia, and I lived about 30 blocks west of there. Got an interview, a couple interviews, and got into their actuarial summer intern program. And most of the components of that program still exist today at Penn Mutual, almost 40 years later. And had the opportunity to work there for a summer. And then I spent the next few weeks, my last semester of my senior year at Penn, working part-time for a different boss, and then accepted a full-time job and started in February of 1987.
So for those of you that are not familiar with the geography of Philadelphia, when you say Fifth and Walnut, some important buildings right around that area. In fact, what is right across the street from the Penn Mutual building that was at Fifth and Walnut?
That would be Independence Hall, Bill, where the Declaration of Independence was signed. The Liberty Bell is another block up. And the cradle of America's liberty was right there.
Yeah, it's actually really wild. The building, obviously, at Fifth and Walnut is still there, and it still says the Penn Mutual Life Insurance Company on the building itself. But you go out the front door, and literally Independence Hall is right there. So it's really cool to see. For those of you that are going to be going to Philadelphia as part of the America 250 celebration, I would urge you to walk by, get a selfie with that. Send it to me. We'll make sure to promote it on the Penn Mutual socials. So you've been with the company for roughly 40 years now. When you first joined, did you ever imagine a career path like the one that you had?
No, I did not. I saw myself, going through my, actuarial development, passing exams, and going through and getting increasing roles with increasing responsibility. But I didn't really have a plan for what was going to happen after I completed my exams, became a fellow of the Society of Actuaries. So just kind of, wanted to, once I got to that point, wanted to be, what do I have to do to lead people? What do I have to do to manage an area? What do I have to do to manage multiple areas? And I was able to proceed through my career answering those questions, and was able at one point to have, 4 or 5 areas report up through me.
Including advanced sales at one point. Is that correct?
including advanced sales,
That had to be a
which was
highlight of your
called
career.
advanced sales at one point and advanced markets at another point.
All right. Last question about you. Then we'll get to what everybody wants to hear about, which is products. So, a lot of our listeners are probably not aware that you spent a little bit of time doing something else. You were still part of the overall Penn Mutual family, but not directly under the Penn Mutual, what do you want to call it, company name. Explain what it is that you did as kind of your little side project and how that helped to shape your view of life insurance carriers in general.
So, Bill, I got an opportunity to work at Vannis Life Insurance Company, which was a company that Penn Mutual purchased in 2016, ostensibly for two reasons. One, it had a New York subsidiary, and over time we were able to transform the structure of Penn Mutual to have a non-New York parent and a New York subsidiary, and we were able to do that with the subsidiary we bought that was owned by Vannis. The other was that Vannis was transforming itself from being a company that sold business primarily through banks to a company that was selling business through primarily direct to consumer. And what we learned in that short time that I was there, so I was the CEO of Vannis at the time, and I replaced the retiring CEO in 2018, was that the direct to consumer business was very expensive. You had to generate your own leads as a company. And it also really, for me, put such a greater premium on having a financial professional in the process to help the client understand that they needed life insurance and to coach them through the process. What we learned at Vannis is if people didn't get accelerated underwriting, and that happened maybe 1 out of every 5 times, the process stopped. So with a financial professional, you have that person who is coaching you, is advising you, is explaining to you how much insurance that you needed insurance, you needed enough to meet whatever need that you had, whether it was income replacement, estate planning. And for me, it really opened my eyes to the old adage that life insurance is sold and not bought. And it came through, very clearly in that short time that we were there. And in fact, we ended up, by the time I left, we sold more business in the final expense arena where Vannis had its own agency force that sold those policies. And that tended to be the driving force behind the sales that Vannis had. Eventually, in 2022, we stopped selling business out of Vannis. So we just manage the in-force book today.
I think that there's a lot of wisdom in there. And I think that that helps to solidify what we always say, which is the financial professional is our customer. Now, our policy owners are the owners of the company because we are a mutual, but the customer that we service first and foremost is the financial professional because not a piece of Penn Mutual business gets sold without a financial professional.
And basically, the policyholder, relies on the financial professional to make a recommendation as to which product and which carrier would fit their needs. And they place a lot of trust in that financial professional to steer them into a solution that helps helps meet their financial needs.
Well, that's actually a great segue to our product discussion here, which is where we're going to spend the most of our time during our chat here today. Just remind our listeners, what is Penn Mutual's product philosophy in a nutshell?
Well, Bill, we go to market as Penn Mutual with arguably the broadest life insurance product set in the industry. And the reason we do that is that gives the financial professional a full toolkit to be able to tailor a solution to the client based on the facts and circumstances as they are presented to them. From a company standpoint, having that broad a portfolio helps us where if a product falls out of favor, we have a multitude of other products that could be in favor so that we aren't overly dependent on any one product, whether it falls in or out of favor.
Is there a reason why when we price and develop products that we don't necessarily chase the shiny new object. In other words, is there a primary reason why our products are not what I would consider gimmicky?
Well, I think we've heard from our customers, our financial professionals, that what they really want from us is consistency. They want to be able to set expectations for their client at the time of sale. And then as they meet with them periodically over the life of that product, they can compare how their product actually performed to what was, explained to them at issue. And our history has been one that we get as close as we possibly can when it comes to actual performance compared to what was illustrated.
In other words, the mantra, you'll never have to apologize for selling a Penn Mutual product, helps to drive our product philosophy. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And we have had testimonials from several of our financial professionals where they've done the analysis to show how consistent our performance has been relative to what expectations they set for their clients. And that's the best feedback we can get. And it continues to fuel what we do and how we price our products and how we manage them going forward.
Well, speaking of consistency, I'm actually going to make a music/life insurance crossover question here. So we established last time you were on that you and I are both big fans of rock and heavy metal music. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily know it by looking at us. You got an actuary and an attorney here, but yes, we are both dyed-in-the-wool metalheads. And I want to make an analogy between a couple of rock bands and Penn Mutual here and see if it's actually apt. So the band AC/DC, The Thunder from Down Under, one of the greatest rock bands ever, 17 albums, just very consistent in regards to sound and tenor, no ballads. When you buy an AC/DC album, you know what you're getting. And then Slayer, kind of the godfathers of modern thrash metal, 12 albums, same idea. In fact, people will sometimes say that Slayer is the AC/DC of thrash metal. Does that mean that Penn Mutual is the AC/DC or Slayer of life insurance companies?
I would wholeheartedly agree. And I would maybe lean toward AC/DC because they've been doing it longer than Slayer has. But that's effectively it. You know what you're going to get. And our customers, our financial professionals reinforce that because, keep doing what you're doing. Don't go chasing the shiny object. And we've heard that from them directly. So we are consistently, pursuing the fact that we want to be able to build products that are simpler, easier to explain, and have a track record of meeting or close to meeting what the client was illustrating. The only other band I would have thrown out there would have been Iron Maiden. And I would say they're a band that, they're not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They have a very long track record. You know where you're getting with them as well. But it's sort of the thing that everybody knows that they're cool, but the mainstream doesn't necessarily know that they're cool. We're sort of like that. We're sort of on the outside, even though we battle with some of the bigger, certainly the big mutuals and some of the other big companies, but we're kind of the Iron Maiden of life insurance companies.
Oh, I love that. You mentioned earlier that we have a very broad portfolio of products. What is the current sales mix of our life insurance products, and is it consistent with what you see with other carriers out there?
Our mix of business, certainly over the last year or two, has been very close to what the overall industry distribution is. Whole life is our biggest selling product. It was around 35%. Industry's right around there as well. Our indexed UL was around 25%. Term was around 13. VUL was around 20. And then fixed UL was somewhere around 4. So remarkably, it's one of the last 2 years we've had sales mixes that have been really close to the industry. Over the last 15 years, we've tended to be a little overweight in whether it was IUL, guaranteed UL, or whole life. But now we're coming into a situation where we might be, I think we're overweight on VUL and maybe underweight on term, and we're right around where the industry averages are on the other three groups. So we're pretty happy with that as a company. One, it kind of validates our strategy of having the breadth of a portfolio that we have. And two, it's a good mix of business. So we have different, profit streams coming from an IUL versus a whole life versus a term versus a VUL. And that's good for risk management purposes. That's a strength for us.
But that's not what you generally see with other carriers where you have that type of mix, correct?
Correct. But you also don't necessarily see the breadth of a portfolio like we have. So, some carriers, particularly our mutual friends, tend to be, more heavily weighted toward whole life and term. They don't typically dabble in indexed UL. They may do some VUL, but they don't have that, that mix. Some of our other competitors on the stock company side don't sell participating whole life. So we've got a portfolio that can reach out to many different financial professionals, which helps our distribution leaders recruit folks, because we've got products that, some people like, and we have other products that other people like.
Well, let's actually dive into some of those product categories a little bit here. And I want to start with whole life. So there was a time during your career with Penn Mutual where whole life really wasn't a product that was part of the Penn Mutual story. When did that change and why?
So up until the early 80s, we were like most other mutual companies. We had pretty much sold whole life and term. That was our life insurance offerings. And then we got into selling universal life. So these were the old universal life products that were, you would call them today, current assumption products. They didn't have, long lifetime, no lapse guarantees. They had, high illustrated rates, because that's in the early 80s, credit rates were pretty high. And we pivoted toward selling universal life because, that was a whole brand new product for us. It had higher credited rates, and we ended up essentially, in some cases, replacing a fair amount of our whole life business with UL and then selling brand new business on the UL chassis. So we got to the 2000s, whole life was maybe 8 to 10% of our sales, which was a far cry from what it was before the 1980s. But then in 2008, we had the Great Recession, the financial crisis, and two things kind of got us to start pushing more toward whole life. One was we wanted more balance in our revenue. As whole life is a fixed premium product, and it provided more of a recurring revenue stream than universal life, because universal life's flexible premium. The other was we saw, because of the fallout from the financial crisis, we saw a big shift to safety, and people wanted their life insurance to be in a safe type of vehicle. And whole life, for many people, was that safe vehicle because it had guaranteed cash value. It had, less exposure to market volatility relative to an indexed UL or a VUL. So we got on the process of building out a brand new product. We had to go find, different financial professionals to sell that product, because the folks we had at the time selling indexed UL, VUL, and guaranteed UL weren't as interested in selling whole life. So we had to go find new friends to be able to sell our whole life business. And we were able to slowly build that up and then periodically update those products. And then we essentially have the modern whole life product that we offer today, with all its flexibility, with its paid up additions riders, its term blend riders. And that's become our flagship product now, after essentially in a 15-year period.
Yeah, just terrific product portfolio of whole life products. When financial professionals are thinking about whole life, I think a lot of them become hyper focused on the dividend rate. Like they'll ask, what's your dividend rate and so forth. But I've heard you and Riley and a bunch of other people from the product area say that that's really not the measure that you should be looking at when you're analyzing a whole life product. For you, what is the proper measurement tool for whole life, and how does the dividend come into play with that measurement tool?
Well, part of the reason, Bill, that the dividend interest rate gets so much attention is it's a single number, and everybody has a dividend interest rate. So it's an easy way to compare. The issue is that whole life is a bundled product. So you can't see charges being taken out every month like you can on a UL chassis. So companies that sell whole life have different premium levels, different guaranteed cash values, different dividend scales, different paid up addition purchase rates. You can't really compare them by just focusing on what the dividend interest rate is. What we tell people to look at is the internal rate of return on the illustration, on the performance, and whether it's your client's goal is death benefit at life expectancy or cash value at age 70. You can line up everybody's whole life product and figure out what's the internal rate of return at either of those places, and then do a fair comparison across all of the other whole life companies. Because of all those differences, the internal rate of return captures all those differences and boils them down into a single number. You sometimes have a similar debate around caps on indexed UL. It's the same thing. It's a little more transparent because UL chassis are unbundled, so you can see all the charges and the credits coming in. But the IRR really captures all those differences that whole life companies can pull in their product design. They have so many levers. I mentioned a bunch of them a few minutes ago, that the IRR takes all those differences and boils them into a number that can be compared.
All right. So for you listeners out there, dividend is not the number to focus on with whole life. It's IRR, and that's generally going to be on the cash value or death benefit, whatever your client's goal is and what it is they're looking for. IRR on those numbers is really how you want to analyze whole life rather than just purely looking at dividend rates.
And just to further that is the dividend is not just the interest rate. It also has a mortality component, expense component. Some companies have a persistency component. Some have a tax component. Penn Mutual has just the three factors: interest, mortality, and expense. But the dividend interest rate could be high for a company, but they might have lower mortality and expense factors that could really impact that performance, which can be measured by internal rate of return. So that's the reason why we focus on internal rate of return, because there's so many things in that whole life chassis that are not visible, and the IRR can bring those out.
All right, last whole life question. I've had a number of people ask me this over the years, and I've even seen some articles written about it, but we're a mid-sized mutual. I mean, a good-sized company, certainly, but we're competing in the whole life space against some very large companies. How is it that we're able to price our products to be competitive with those companies that are so much larger than we are?
I think some of that has to do with the support for the dividends that we have. So we have the advantage we have of being a mid-size and not a huge company is our investment folks can get in and out of sectors really quickly and make gains. Whereas the larger companies, it's like moving a big ship. It's hard to turn those ships around quick enough. We've had consistency in our underwriting, which helps our mortality dividend. And we have a philosophy around making sure that, a financial professional that does business with Penn Mutual can get a sense on what rating that client's going to have based on their history with us. So, somebody will ask me, well, what's your sweet spot for underwriting? And I'll say is our consistency. Like, we're not known for, a cardiac company or a prostate cancer company. We are consistent with our application of our guidelines, and we want to be able to give the financial professional an idea that if they bring a client in that's a preferred risk, that 9 out of 10 times it's going to be a preferred risk. So I think being able to manage to that mortality level, coupled with the ability to get some gains on the investment side, we've historically outperformed industry averages for net investment income yield. That's really been the secret to be able to compete with these bigger companies.
So that consistency, the Iron Maiden story all over again.
There's a theme that we're talking about here, Bill, that kind of fits through all of our product activity. And it is that consistency story between the in-force performance, the underwriting. That's really what we're offering to our financial professionals and their clients.
All right, let's turn to another product line here, IUL. We don't have multipliers. We don't have volatility controlled index accounts. Why is it that we keep our IUL products relatively vanilla?
Well, it's back to the feedback we hear from our customers, our financial professionals. We have a underlying philosophy on indexed UL where we want to have simple designs. So we tend to favor the S&P 500, and we have different, offshoots of that, but effectively it's the S&P 500 index excluding dividends. We also want to have a focus on guarantees. So we have, we have zero and non-zero floors. We have guaranteed bonuses. We have a no-lapse guarantee, albeit to like age 80, but we want to be able to have that structure, that guarantee. And we also manage our caps and our participation rates. We want to be able to hold a cap or a participation rate for anywhere from 6 to 12 months. And we manage all of our accumulation IUL business in one segment. So that's where we get our consistency story. Not all those products have the same caps or the same participation rates because they were built at different times over the last 20 years. But when we change those rates, whether we raise them or whether we lower them, we do them consistently. We do them in tandem so that directionally they all either go up or go down, but they're not going to necessarily go up or down by the same amount because they were priced at different times. And we have some of our early IUL products had 2% floors. So at a time when not a lot of companies had those high of floors. So our caps are going to reflect the fact that we have a 2% floor. But over time, we started to offer 1% and 0% floors.
Yeah, for those listeners that have been in the audience when Ray has talked about this or Riley or anybody else on the product team, one of my favorite slides that they use shows kind of the cap rate on the different product lines or the different product versions that we've had over the years. And it's really cool to see because I'm going to do something with my hands where people that are watching on YouTube will see it, but people that are just listening are going to think, what is he doing? But basically the idea is that maybe you have a slightly higher cap here versus here. You might have a higher floor on this one than on this one. But the idea here is that they work in tandem. So if one goes down, one goes down. If one goes up, the other goes up. And I think that kind of consistent story is something that really resonates with financial professionals. And I know that you get a lot of feedback on that. Is that correct?
We do. And when the financial professional has those periodic annual reviews where they're walking through what the client experienced on their policy and what expectations were set at issue, those conversations more often than not tend to be very positive between the financial professional and the client because we are not typically designing products with aggressive illustrations. We would rather give the policy the best chance of reaching what was illustrated, knowing that there's going to be a lot of times where it may not exactly match, but if we can get it close to what was illustrated, then that helps that story that the financial professional has told to their client, and it reinforces the decision that was made back when the policy was sold.
All right, last product line I want to touch on here is VUL. That's kind of my first love from a product perspective. It's the only type of cash value product that I own. And one of many reasons I was so excited to come to Penn Mutual a few years ago was that we have great VUL products. We did at that time. It hasn't changed. Was there a conscious effort to really become a major player in the VUL space? And does our limited distribution of that product play into the pricing associated with that product?
So we did make a conscious decision to get more into the VUL space. We've had a VUL product in our portfolio since the early 90s, but there was a time where we were selling, it was basically 1% of our sales. So we pivoted along with the rest of the industry to offering up to a lifetime guarantee in a VUL chassis. And that gave us some financial relief from a reserving standpoint. We built one for single life and for survivorship, and they are both very competitive, particularly for short pay designs. But we've also maintained a strong presence in the accumulation space. We were the first company to offer a fixed indexed account on our VUL. We had done that a few years ago, and we've continued to do that. And we have a lot of people that buy our product, particularly because of the fact they want to be able to allocate some of those premiums and their account value into a fixed indexed account that has a bounded return style, a floor and a cap. So I would say that that's been a conscious decision to expand in that market. We do have a scarcity philosophy around distribution of VUL. We have a limited set of broker dealers. We have our homegrown broker dealer, HDK, that supports the 1847 financial channel. We have all the broker dealer relationships that with our strategic alliance relationships. And then we have a handful of others that we've separately worked with, but we like our story. We like the fact that we have a limited distribution on the VUL side, and it hasn't hurt our sales any. We're above the industry average, and we continue to do great things with our VUL product segment.
Do you think that VUL is going to be the product type that you're going to see the most innovation in the industry over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, it's certainly the product that we've gotten the most requests for more activity. And you're starting to see folks getting back to doing current assumption VULs where either the financial professional or their firm is actively managing those policies because they need to be able to do that to ensure that the client doesn't underfund those policies and not have a death benefit. So myself and Riley have gotten requests for that type of design for a while now, and we're getting it from many different corners of distribution. So I see us looking at potentially adding those products to our lineup over the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's really exciting. All right. I want to pivot again here and talk a little bit about one of the reasons why we have you on the show here today. And that's because you recently announced that you're going to be retiring. So this episode will drop at the end of April here. You've announced that you're going to be retiring in early May, I believe it is. Why now?
So it's actually late May.
Late May. Okay, that's even better. Yeah.
May 29th. So I've had thought about retirement, and not in just passing thoughts, and then became a little bit more real around the holidays. And then I've talked to a lot of people who have recently retired, and while they all had different stories, there was a thread that ran between them that was common. And the thread was, if you can make it work financially, you should retire while you're healthy. And I've even seen, limited sample size, but I've seen people that I know that have worked, into their late 60s, early 70s, and then their bodies broke down on them. They couldn't enjoy the fruits of their long labor. So, I kind of came to the decision that I could make this work financially. 40 years, and I wanted to retire when I still had my health. So Rick Klenk, who's our chief financial officer, we had a conversation. We agreed on basically a 3-month glide path for a transition, and then I'll be in the process of transitioning those duties over to others, and then be on my way. And I also wanted to retire in the summer so that I know people who've retired in the winter in the Northeast, and not having a schedule and not being able to go outside is a tough combination. So I have firsthand knowledge of some of that. So,
all right. Are you saying that we need to blame Tom Harris for this?
I would say Tom Harris is a person I consulted. So I wouldn't say blame would be the right answer, but consultation would be a better descriptor, Bill.
That's fair. I know he still listens to the show. So, hi, Tom. All right. As you were thinking about kind of that next step and preparing to retire, what are some of the things that you're going to miss about being at Penn Mutual? And what are some of the things that you're most looking forward to once you do step away?
Well, what I'll miss is really the people that I've gotten to work with. Some I've worked with for 30 plus years. Others like yourself, it's been 2 to 3 years. But I've been able to learn something from just about everybody I've worked with because everybody has a different perspective on the industry because of where they sit or their experiences or they've worked for multiple companies. So I've been able to take that from almost everybody I've worked with and been able to, learn something from each of them. And, we've been on an upward arrow at Penn Mutual for a long time. And, we keep reinventing ourselves. We keep innovating. We keep adding new products. We keep, doing things like the Life Matters podcast and some of the marketing things that you've brought to Penn Mutual. It keeps us, on the forefront of things. As a 175 plus year mutual company, we're still able to innovate. And I think that's been something I've really been proud of, how we've been able to, compete with some of these larger companies that have, more assets, more resources. And, we've been able to hold our own with many of these bigger companies because we've been able to be nimble, to be agile and get, move resources to do things like, the accelerated client experience like ACE. And we're going to be, celebrating its 10th year of existence this summer or next summer, I guess. So that's going to be, that's a great story of how we marshaled resources from across the company and were able to deliver something in a fairly brisk sort of time and then just unleashed it on every one of our agencies and regions. So it turned out to be, one of the highlights of my time at Penn Mutual is being involved in that project.
Again, looking at retirement, what are you most looking forward to?
Well, I think the opportunity to, play a little golf, keep my hand in the industry to some extent, looking at potentially joining either a board for a company in the industry or adjacent to the industry. So I want to be able to keep my hands in that. Lots of volunteer opportunities that I'll be exploring. So my calendar will continue to be busy. So I'm looking forward to just starting a new chapter. I know that's an old term that people use, but it really will be a new chapter for me. One that, I've, written a book of, with 40 chapters in it. Now it's a time to write a different one, starting with a new chapter.
All right. I got 3 last questions for you here, and they'll be relatively quick. First of all, if you were advising product leaders throughout the industry, not necessarily Penn Mutual, but the industry itself, what is one mistake or one area that you would hope that some of our contemporaries might stay away from these days? Is it more aggressive illustrations? Is it reserving? Is it some of the reinsurance things that we see out there? What is the one thing that you would like to kind of remove from the industry in the future from a actuarial and product development standpoint?
I think of the things that you mentioned and the ones that I'm thinking of, it's our industry will get where I think we can get hurt is if we set unreasonable expectations in an illustration and then not deliver on them. I think, we don't want to put financial professionals in the position of regretting the recommendation that they made for a client. And that really is the underpinning of our philosophy of trying to be, not be aggressive with illustrations and making sure that we do whatever we can to have actual performance be as close as possible to what was illustrated. But I think that becomes, if we continue to push the envelope on aggressive illustrations, then the regulators will have their way with us. And I think we'll be in a spot where we'll be forced to run extremely conservative illustrations and it'll end up hurting all the companies because people will not look at that product. Will take something away from what that product could do, because we as an industry have overpromised and underdelivered, and that you don't really want to be in that position.
Totally agree. All right. Some pure fun questions to round it out here. All right. Let's say that tomorrow you had the ability to reanimate the dead. You also had the ability to mend fences, but only between musicians, and you could only reanimate musicians. And you had the ability to see any musician or band in the history of music, but for one night only. What would that band or musician be? And it could be as broad as like, hey, I want to see Beethoven play the piano, or I want to see this rock band. But I know that everybody has an answer to that. What would yours be?
So my original answer would have been, if you hadn't put the caveat of one night only, my original answer would have been the Doors, because you would go to a Doors concert. I never saw them play. I was not old enough when they were in their short heyday. But one night only, Morrison could play for like 3 minutes and be off the stage. So I wouldn't want to waste my one night only with that. But that would have been a concert that I would have loved to have seen, because it could have been 3 minutes or it could have been 6 hours, because you never know what you're going to get. But if I was going to reanimate anybody, it's a recent thing. It would definitely be Ozzy Osbourne with Black Sabbath. That would be a great one night only. And I know there was a tribute concert to him before he passed away, which I've seen multiple times on YouTube. That would have been a cool place to spend a couple hours just hearing him sing some of that. And then I think the coolest thing that you can do for a musician is have another band sing the song that you created and sing it back to you. And I just think that's such a cool thing. And there's two examples that I'll share with you, Bill, that I ran into that I thought were really neat. One is when Led Zeppelin was getting the Kennedy Center honors, and Hart sang Stairway to Heaven with the brass band, a choir. It was the most phenomenal thing I had seen, until I had seen Metallica do Funeral for a Friend, Love's Lives Bleeding in front of Elton John and Bernie Taupin, which was phenomenal.
Yeah, that Sabbath show I think it was in Birmingham, in England,
Yes.
With all those bands playing Sabbath songs, and then Ozzy's last performance, obviously, because he passed away about a week after the show.
Right.
Was truly incredible. I was lucky enough to see Sabbath with Ozzy twice, so I do consider myself fortunate there, and both times it was truly amazing. All right, I got a sports related question for you. And
Sure.
this one's going to hurt a little bit here, but it's funny, and we're going to talk about it here. So, as we established on the last time you were here, you are a Dallas Cowboys fan, and we have now passed the 30-year mark since the Cowboys have last won the Super Bowl. And I want to just go through a list of things here that didn't exist the last time the Cowboys won a Super Bowl here, and get your reaction, and just get a question of, are they ever going to be relevant again? But some of the things on this list, it's a very long list. I'm not going to read all of them. DVD players didn't exist. Google did not exist. Let's see. Saquon Barkley as a human being did not exist at that time. The camera phone, both the Tampa Bay Rays and the Arizona Diamondbacks did not exist. Bluetooth did not exist. South Park, the TV show, did not exist. Facebook, the Euro, which is a great one, just to think about. Let's see, a couple of other here. Oh, Harry Potter did not exist the last time the Cowboys won the Super Bowl. Was it 7, 8 books, bunch of movies, TV shows, so forth? Are they ever going to be relevant again? And what's that going to take to get them there?
Well, it's clear that the ownership of the Dallas Cowboys and their fans have a very different definition of what success is. The owners of the Cowboys point to the team valuation. I, as a Cowboy fan, point to the trophies with the footballs on them And it's actually worse that they haven't won a Super Bowl in 30 years. They haven't been to an NFC championship game in 30 years. The Arizona Cardinals have been to an NFC championship game.
And a Super Bowl.
And a Super Bowl. The Jets have been to 2 AFC championship games. And that sorry franchise now has the longest playoff drought of any North American sport. The question's going to be what happens when Jerry Jones leaves and his kids, who are, will succeed, how are they going to run the team? As a Cowboys fan, I would prefer that his daughter run the team because she's a marketing genius. She can handle the marketing pieces, and then she can get a real football person in to run the team. Kind of like a Sean McVay, maybe to run the Cowboys. That'd be
not available
to get him to.
He's not available. Can't have him. All right. Well, Ray, hey, a real pleasure to have this conversation today. A real pleasure to work together for the last few years here. I know that we'll still be working together for a couple of months, but a couple of months goes by in a blink of an eye here. Appreciate the leadership. Appreciate the friendship. Thanks so much for being a guest on this episode of Life Matters, a Penn Mutual podcast.
Great, Bill. Thanks again for having me on, and it's been great working with you and your team, and we'll absolutely have to catch up for the next 8 weeks.
Sounds good. Well, thanks again to Ray. Just a great guy overall and a wealth of information on subjects that I find very interesting, specifically life insurance, 1980s heavy metal, and sports. I know opinions on that will differ, but I hope that you all enjoyed the conversation. I know that I did. If you have a question for me or for Ray or anybody else associated with the show, you can send me an email to lifematters@pennmutual.com. Again, that's lifematters@pennmutual.com. That's a special mailbox that only I have access to, and I do respond to every email that is sent there. So one last time, that is lifematters@pennmutual.com. If you haven't checked out the Penn Mutual YouTube page, frankly, I'm just embarrassed for you at this point here. What are you waiting for? There is so much great content there. Just go to YouTube, type Penn Mutual in the search box. It will bring up the channel, and you can peruse all the great content that we have there. We have current and past episodes of the show. We have video content that we have developed specifically for YouTube. So check it out today. Smash that subscribe button. Like some of the videos. Comment if you'd like. We certainly appreciate every subscriber that we have. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I would encourage you to do so today. Speaking of subscribing, if you haven't subscribed to the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, make sure you do so today so you don't miss future episodes of the show. And then speaking of Apple Podcasts, that is still our biggest distribution method for this show. And if you have a second, stop by and leave us a review. A star review only takes a few seconds and helps boost visibility of the show. If you write a written review, I'll be your best friend. So for Ray Caucci, I'm Bill Bell. Thank you so much for joining us here today, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update.